You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org. Hi, listeners. I wanted to take a moment to talk about Heritage Radio Network, the organization that produces this podcast. HRN is the only podcast network dedicated to food, beverages, and the culinary world. It's also a nonprofit that educates emerging food storytellers. HRN brings listeners free podcasts on everything from the artistry of baking to the craft of brewing, the complexities of cheesemongering to the challenges of solving climate change. And they need your help. Help HRN thrive by going to heritageradionetwork.org/donate and making a donation to keep food radio free and accessible. This episode is part of our special series on Canadian foodways, which I'm calling More Than Maple. Meet Jessica Allen. Jess Allen is probably best known as one of the co-hosts of CTV's popular daytime talk show, The Social. But the St. Thomas, Ontario native also has a reputation for being a bit of a foodie. From working in restaurants to writing about food, relationships, and pop culture, you will hear Jess's excitement over food shine through in our interview. Jess, I am so excited. I never get a chance to see people in person. I've been doing this show for 5 years, and I started it in the pandemic, I was telling you. And so very rarely have I got a chance to actually talk to somebody in person. And the fact that I get to do a great segment with you, somebody who I've had a chance to actually be on TV with, is a blast.
I am thrilled.
This is so fun. So you are so well known and so beloved, in my humble opinion. You're saying it, I'm not, by, Canadian viewers and by the, folks. I'm assuming that people feel like they know you because you are just so, you're just so welcoming.
That's very kind.
You are.
I get relatable a lot.
Yeah. I guess relatable. Yes, I feel you. I feel you on that. I get that too.
It's a nice thing, and I wonder if that comes from, and this isn't a dig at myself, but appearance, because I might not look like the typical person on TV.
Right.
And I actually take that as a huge compliment. I love it.
Well, you are you. Right. And that and nobody can take that away. And so, and you beat to your own drum. And I mean that with this, the sincerest, compliments as well. And so one of the things that makes you is your passion for food. And for folks in the United States who are listeners who might not be familiar, Jess Allen, who I, in our little intro blurb, I've acknowledged this, is one of the co-hosts of The Social, which is one of the most popular daytime shows in Canada. And in the intro, in the credits, each person kind of has their own personality thing. I noticed this the last time I was on the show, and I was like, oh, every person kind of there's something about them in the credits that kind of highlights their little personality. And yours is food. It's a cupcake, I think.
It is.
And I noticed, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a symbol that is this is kind of each individual woman's vibe.
Yeah.
And so, you have been passionate about food for a long time. So that's why I couldn't think of anybody better to join us for this special series of episodes that I'm calling More Than Maple.
Oh, I love it.
My salute to Canada. Because, my show usually is about food and culture in the Midwest. And I feel like the Midwest, as well as, Canada, they're misunderstood. People just assume the Midwest is just a butter cow. It's meat and potatoes. And yes, those things are there.
Yes.
And again, no, not knocking them either, but there's so much more. And I feel like you feel me on that.
I definitely feel you on that, and think Ontario is a great sort of launching off point to make that same argument.
Yeah. So you grew up in Ontario.
Yes.
Ontario is ginormous.
Massive.
It goes from Minnesota to Vermont or something it's huge. And so, again, for our American audience thinking Ontario, okay, we know it's close to us, whatever, but there's nothing, Thunder Bay's got nothing to do with Ottawa.
Absolutely.
And they're all in the same province.
Agriculture is different. The people are different, but there is sort of common denominators, that's for sure.
Yeah. What about that with food?
I think the variations that you see in food are sort of dictated by what can be grown. And
Yep.
also, because Canada is still relatively a new country, what sort of pocket of immigration you have in those different regions.
Mhm.
And that I'm going outside of Ontario, but a place like Winnipeg, they had a huge influx of Ukrainian people.
Yeah.
So of course you know that. So like there become these pockets of regionality, and I think in my mind it sort of makes me feel that it's very hard to pin down what Canada's sort of, if you had to define Canada's food language, it's almost impossible to do.
Yeah.
I think the point of pride for me, if we hone it in on Ontario, is that there isn't one. You can't define it because there's so much variation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I've heard this from other folks. And I, as I've talked to folks for our Canadian episodes, and, this is what we get as well with the Midwest, because, if you think about other places within the United States, the Deep South or Southwestern, there are or even like New England, there's stronger bonds as far as like the definition. Like you can say, oh, it's barbecue, or it's quote soul food, or it's green chilies, or whatever, or it's lobster and chowder.
Yeah.
It's something. The Midwest does not have that outside of like it's this generic breadbasket of the world, and I feel like it's kind of like Canada, it's maple, and then maybe it's poutine,
exactly,
and maybe it's Tim Hortons
and butter tarts.
Yeah,
there are those things, but I think there are probably a ton of Canadians who've never had a butter tart. Is that sacrilege? It could be, but I bet it's true.
Yeah. So for you, which part of Ontario did you grow up in?
Not to brag, but I grew up in southwestern Ontario, which is where the majority, if you looked at a population map, it's like ... and then southwestern Ontario, it's where all of the people live.
Yeah.
And I sort of right along Lake Erie. 15 minutes from Lake Erie in tobacco country.
We are, so then we're neighbors, because I'm Lake Erie too.
You're right across the lake. Yeah.
Hello.
So I felt it was a beautiful place to grow up. And growing up, my parents, I wouldn't call them foodies. My mom, would prepare family recipes passed down from her mom. But otherwise, the only time I really have strong food memories are seasonal and mostly summer. Right. Because I remember getting excited about corn, about peaches.
Yes.
About apples, about cherries, strawberries, green beans, like all of that stuff. And where I grew up, there were little farmer stands that dotted the sides of the road. And it was just thrilling.
Do you have Amish too?
We do.
Yeah. So I feel like we literally are like, because what you are describing is very similar to my, sort of food memories. And what got me so excited about food too is because I could set the clock by these, the calendar by these certain things. Oftentimes it came with a festival.
Yeah.
And so like that I can totally relate to, and says something about the overwords used of terroir.
You're right.
But it's real.
Right. You just reminded me, Pumpkin Fest was close by. There's a rhubarb festival, all of those things. But my mom would be embarrassed to hear this, but like I don't think I saw a clove of garlic until I was in university. My parents just didn't use it. It was this weird thing. And then I would say like my interest in food really started when I left St. Thomas, Ontario in southwestern Ontario and moved a little further north to Toronto to go to school.
Yeah.
And worked in a restaurant, an Italian restaurant, for a good decade.
Yeah.
And that's when I was started, similar to you, started making connections between food and history.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, why is there salt cod in Italy, bacala, they called it, and also on the coast of Newfoundland, where one of our provinces where I lived for a stint, and making those connections. It was pretty magical. And then realizing that, some people make a living out of food writing. That never occurred to me that I could.
Right.
But I remember being acutely aware. It was right around sort of the mid-90s when mostly the UK, people like Nigella Lawson.
Right, of course. Jamie Oliver. Yeah, I remember the Naked Chef being such a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, being thrilled by that.
That's so. I can see the passion for those of you who are listening, because we don't. This is radio, right? This is podcast. So you can't see the
hand gestures.
Exactly. There's a lot of hand gestures. There's a lot of
peaches.
There's a lot of excitement going on. Well, I want to hear a little bit about your family recipes. I mean, no garlic aside, I think it is one of these things that tracing those food memories, and then, you just kind of explain to us the awakening, right?
Yeah.
But, what about nostalgia? I feel like food, and I bet that you have adult nostalgia too for things, but let's stick to the Canadian ones.
There's a lot of Canadian nostalgia. And again, it's nothing uniquely Canadian, but it's dishes that would have been brought over, I'm guessing, before Canada was Canada,
right.
Before 1867, when my mishmash of ancestors came over from Great Britain, mostly Great Britain, and Alsace-Lorraine. I believe it was at the time, maybe Germany owned, but could have been France.
That's really the tricky thing about being Alsatian. Yeah,
that's right. But so my grandmother passed down. I didn't get to know her, so she passed away when I was 2. So I don't have any food memories from her, but I do have memories from her 2 daughters, my mom and my aunt, Sandy. So Linda and Sandy, they would make a number of dishes that their mom made. And so I know those dishes through them. And one of them, this is a bit of family lore, were her cabbage rolls. And I was like, cabbage rolls? Is that an Alsatian dish? I don't think they are. I would say it's more Eastern Europe.
I was going to say Eastern Europe. I mean, as someone who is part Ukrainian, I feel like, that is very much a Eastern Europe church lady phenomenon.
Right.
Yeah.
But my grandmother made these cabbage rolls, and then Sandy and Linda made these cabbage rolls. And I assumed maybe my grandmother got the recipe from a Ukrainian immigrant, who knows, a Polish immigrant. But it turns out it was her neighbor, Vi Moffat, across the street in Strathroy, Ontario, who was English. So
go Vi.
Go Vi. So the idea of, I've toyed with the idea of authenticity and restaurants for a while, sort of being more on the strict side after working in this Italian restaurant called Terroni, that, we're going to make things the way they've been made for 100 years. We're not going to change them. There's honor and beauty in that. And I agree with that. But at the same time, a lot of the foods that have been passed down to me, I wouldn't have known them if they had kept to their authentic roots.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
I love the way I guess what I'm trying to say is I've adapted more and been more open-minded to the way that dishes change over time, and have been more open to it, I guess.
Yeah.
Like being less strict.
Thanks for listening to Eat Your Heartland Out. It's time for another break, but don't go far. I'll be back with more from my interview with The Social's Jessica Allen.
This episode is brought to you by Plugra European-style butter, crafted for those who demand precision and exceptional results in the kitchen. With 82% butter fat and a slow churn process, Plugra gives you flakier crusts, fluffier cakes, and rich, melt-in-your-mouth pastries, because great baking starts with great butter. Unlike standard American butters, which have only 80% butter fat, Plugra ensures the ideal moisture and fat balance so your recipes turn out just right every time. That's why professional chefs trust Plugra and home bakers love it. Plugra's slow churn process creates a smooth, creamy butter that gives dough a soft, pliable texture, making rolling, folding, and laminating effortless. Whether you're perfecting a buttery pie crust or layering a delicate croissant, Plugra helps you bake with confidence. Experience the difference for yourself. Find Plugra in stores near you or visit Plugra.com. That's Plugra.com.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I think that there's a lot of what I would call maybe cultural cross-pollination in food. There's this sense that, I mean, again, like growing up where I grew up, where, I'm sort of the poster child hybrid of you're either Southern European or you're Eastern European or you're German, or you're Irish.
Yeah.
So, but everybody eats each other's stuff. So, certain people will even if you're not Eastern European, you're making kolache, like for holidays, the pastry that's like filled with apricot paste and and poppy seed, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Like my Irish best friend is making that as much as anybody. It's because
that's beautiful.
Because culturally speaking, it's like that is what Christmas is for everybody, if that makes sense. So it does, because somebody knows somebody and somebody married somebody somewhere that all those ethnic. So it's that ethnic cross-pollination, which makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's a good. It's how we learn about one another.
Exactly.
Which, and one of the things I think is really interesting about you mentioned, you never realized that food writing was something that you could make a career out of, that you were acutely aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you must have held on to that because you ultimately did kind of cut your teeth, as I think I heard you say, kind of in that food writing space and in blogs, and you connect food
Yeah.
to so many different things. Tell me how, I guess, what inspired you to really pursue that, and how you see the different kind of threads between food and other cultural components.
Oh God, that's such a great question. I think sometimes you have to see it to know that it's possible. And after working in this restaurant for a decade, I got a job as an editorial assistant at our national magazine, kind of like America's Time,
Right, Maclean's.
Newsweek, Maclean's,
Yeah.
that's right. And I started off as editorial assistant's a nice way of saying secretary. I answered the phones, fixed the photocopier.
Yes,
But,
see, this is what happens, folks, when you grow up in the 90s. And
Fax machine.
yes, and your big job, because I had one of these too, more than one, was you picked stuff up the fax machine, and then
Yeah.
to do the press clips of the day was a Xerox packet.
Oh my God.
You cut the Xerox
Opening the mail, people wrote in letters still.
Yep.
Answered the phone, my
Yeah.
God.
We're
But,
ancient. We're dinosaurs over here.
the editor-in-chief at the time encouraged story ideas and pitches from everyone, and slowly but surely I started pitching stories. And the first one was about a chef that got to cook for, I believe, Barack Obama and at that time Stephen Harper. And he was lived close to where I grew up.
Yeah.
And it was a big deal. And I thought that was such a beautiful moment. And that was the first story. And then ended up writing my first big story about pie crust.
I love it.
Because again, it was...
I'm a pie crazy person.
Oh my God.
We
Well,
need to talk about
The
this.
story was, and they called it Pie Wars, which I thought was great, such a great title. And it came from this idea of me, whenever I order fancy pie from a fancy bakery or at a fancy restaurant, it never hits the same as a pie from a pie fair or a pie made from an aunt or a grandmother.
100%.
And I was like, what's the difference? And so I set out on sort of like a parody, not a parody because I took it very seriously, but this fact-finding mission.
Yeah.
I'm an interloper going to figure out what makes the best pie crust. It came down to pie crust. And it turns out, as I'm sure everyone has very strong opinions, but, butter or lard or a combination of the two.
Mhm.
And it turns out that most of these grannies who win all the pie festival contests,
Yep.
they were using lard, which I thought
I
was
am not
very
surprised.
interesting.
Not surprised.
Yeah. I'm getting off track.
No, not at all. No, this is all very relevant stuff, because pies, and one of the reasons I'm obsessed with them, and probably one of the things that sent you down this rabbit hole too, was again this concept. I feel like pies are a very specific thing that capture a feeling more than anything else.
Mhm.
There's so much, there's nostalgia attached to it. There's this concept of hospitality, of the heartland,
Mhm.
of tradition. There's just there's a lot of stuff that I feel is appropriated onto a pie,
Mhm.
which I feel is probably why you had such a different, why is it different in a restaurant
Mhm.
versus, a family recipe, or getting it at a bake scale or
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
Because you can't replace the heart that goes into making a pie like that. And so I find that really interesting. That's why pie was my gateway drug too.
Oh my God, this is incredible.
I had side note, spoiler alert to listeners, I don't think I've ever told this story. So while I was still in office, I had a Tumblr blog.
Oh my God, now you're going back.
Yeah, so in 2012, 2013, called Humble Pie, and I literally would have a pie of the weekend. I would just research different, the more random, the better. And it was basically a pie anthology
Yeah.
of, and so, and then I would write, if I would find different weird factoids about these
Yeah.
pies. So somewhere, I think in my archives on my website lives all of the recipes I collected
Oh my God.
on the Humble Pie website.
I
So,
love this.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a shared interest from our backgrounds. Not that I've ever been in politics, but the idea of searching for origins and the interest in historiography,
Yes.
the history of history,
Yes.
essentially, and wanting to go back and connect dots.
Yes.
And I think that's where the food writing and food history really lit my fire. And then going to writers, I wanted to ask you about him because I think he's Midwestern. Kelvin Trillin. Is
I
Kelvin
think sounds
Trillin?
familiar.
Anyway, I can't remember. but like reading food writing made me realize that they weren't writing about food
Right.
per se.
Right. It's not
They
just a bunch of
were,
recipes.
but
yeah.
it was the gateway
Yeah.
into talking about everything else. People like Jim Harrison, who is probably most famous for writing the novella that Legends of the Fall
Mhm.
was eventually made into a movie from. But his food writing was about so much more. It was about the big picture, the big questions, a lot of existentialism, a lot
Yeah.
of beauty too, family, loss, and that still thrills me to know
Yes.
that food can allow me and access to all of this that's inside of me, I guess.
Yeah. No, I again,
Memory, history.
we are speaking the same language for sure, and that is why I am so passionate about food, exactly, because it is that connecting dot
Yeah.
in a way that, I mean, what about women's role in the house? What the
yeah.
technological advancements? Like, there's all kinds of weird things. That
Mhm.
climate change. I mean,
If I could go back,
endless.
if I could go back, I studied art history, but if I could go back to grad school, I wonder if I would be like a food archaeologist. That would be so cool.
Yeah, that
oh
would
my
be
God.
Let's call somebody up and be like, you know what you need?
Yeah.
You need a food archaeology program, and I think you have your first 2 students.
Yes, exactly. My God.
Or maybe we should co-teach a class. I don't know. We're gonna have to put our thinking
we can
caps
start
on.
auditing.
Yes, let's do that. Let's do that. So you've done all of this stuff. I mean, tracing all the way back, and then we talked about you've been a food writer, and but this passion remains today.
Yeah.
And so, how do you bring food into the work that you do now?
That's a great question. On the after Maclean's, I got the show here at the Social, and they recognized that there was an interest in food and had read my past work at Maclean's, and I think they tried to factor that in all the field pieces I get to do.
Yes.
Actually, one of my first field pieces was at the DEP, who I believe you've interviewed,
Yes.
Len Senator.
Yeah, Lemon Senator.
Yeah, so he had a newcomer program.
Newcomer Kitchen, yeah.
That's right. So one of our first edits, particularly one of the edits that I'm most proud of, was meeting some of the women at the Newcomer Kitchen.
Yeah.
So therein lies the connection there. They allowed me to pitch and gave me the tools to make these field pieces, aka the team. As you know, it takes a lot of field producers, editors, and so on.
Yep.
And you pour your heart into these things, and they end up getting edited down to 3 minutes.
Oh my goodness. It is the truth. I don't think that, I mean, you don't realize until you start doing it that, and with my experience on my show, America the Bountiful, where, it's pre-taped and all of that stuff, we spend 3-4 days in the field for 26 minutes.
Yeah.
And
content.
it's just, there's so much. And then the tough part is trying to figure out, how to prioritize what you actually put into the final product. It's great that the Social has recognized that and lets you go out there and do your thing. One of the things that I have seen is something that you do, basically is like an Instagram takeover called Caftans in the Kitchen.
Yes.
Which I think is hilarious. And tell us, how did that come to be? Because I also feel like there's like an interactive component to, like, sometimes
There
people like
is.
vote for like what you guys are going to do. And
So Caftans in the Kitchen started, as many things did, during the pandemic.
Yeah.
When we were desperate to keep, our show went dark for 2 weeks at the beginning of the pandemic. And then again, the power and ingenuity of people who figured out a way for us to get back on air, all of us taping from home.
Yep.
We had 4 hosts at the time. And so there were basically, what is Jess going to be doing? And so we came up with an idea of Caftans in the Kitchen. Simon, my partner of 20 years, filmed it. I put on a caftan and I cooked in my kitchen. It was as simple as that.
So-
Let's get just busy.
So, there's truth in advertising. Caftans in the Kitchen, which, by the way, I don't know if you remember this. My first appearance on the Social was during the panel. It was in 2020.
Oh my gosh!
And one of the all talk panels, I came in and I talked about the cookbook, and then I started to come back, on those Friday
when
segments.
We went live back.
Well, I was in the boxes for a little bit in 2021, and then live. So I remember like seeing folks like in there, myself too, like in your living room, like what kind of backdrop can you like make not look like a total disaster?
Exactly.
So how do you pick? So obviously, I get the origin story, but 5 years on, it's still kicking. So how did it evolve?
So it evolved through the pandemic, and then when we got our butts back into the office, our executive producer Laura really wanted to keep it going, so we kept it going. It happens every other Thursday at 4:30. I sometimes I keep waiting for her to say like, "Okay, we've done this enough."
But why?
But you know what? It brings me so much joy, and again, so much freedom to be able to. I get help from a producer because there's a lot of things I don't know, but I get to envision sort of what I'm going to be making, how we're going to let the audience know what I'm making via social media,
Right.
and then how it plays out in the live segment on the show the next day.
Right.
So it's like this 360 sort of thing, which is really thrilling for me to sort of plan and think about, because it helps you make some of your decisions. Like one thing that I might make at home would be a disaster on live air. Like, for example,
good,
like
100%.
I have to rule out making fish dishes generally because it's got to taste good the next day.
Right.
Same with pasta, unless it's maybe a pasta bake that,
Right.
is a little more forgiving, like a macaroni and cheese. But so the fact that I have to bring it in the next day really sort of makes me have to hone in.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
And then I'm constantly looking for like a news peg. What's exciting that's going on in the world? And I will say, tariffs.
I have no idea what
my dear friend, tariffs, and on the heels of St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
So I made a shepherd's pie with all Canadian ingredients.
Love it.
Yeah, it's things like that. Trying to find a way in to make something topical and conversational. And I will say, my boss, the executive producer, Laura, especially loves when something doesn't turn out. You know why? It's better TV.
Yep.
One time I brought in a lemon meringue pie, and it was essentially soup. Capri. It was a soup pie.
You did not use the right thickener.
I did not.
You know that the cornstarch is your friend, right?
I do. I don't know what happened. I've made it before, and it was an absolute disaster. But again, you cut that on live television. Everyone was laughing but me, and I was okay with it.
It is one of these things that over the years, so over the last couple years, although I haven't done it in about 6 months because I was on the road filming the travel show, but I since I guess maybe 2022, I've been before that maybe 2021. I started to do like a monthly cooking segment on one of my local channels called Capri's Comfort Kitchen on their noon show. And so same sort of thing. I would go and I would be like, okay, well, I've done everything from like a holiday hook to like, it's National Whatever Day.
Yes.
To, we have a big charity race. So I made like, this is how you can like make like energy bars to take with you, like random stuff. But I have had situations where, the burner was too hot and it started to bubble and like get on us, that like, you're trying to do the hand mixer thing and it splashes all over the place and there's nothing you can do because when it is live TV, because that's it's like a total
different
game. And I got 4 minutes to do something. I got 4 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And so I have to prep everything in advance. I have to think about, okay, what's going to like look good? How fast can I get it done?
What do you do ahead of time?
Right, exactly. So I always have to have what I call stunt food.
Right.
So it's like, so I have the finished product, and how do I stage it? How do I do all the food styling? And I reel it all in myself, it's like, and it's like, it totally, I love it, but it's like, you have to start to think about that. But I feel you because it's like, I have been in these situations where I'm just really glad that I'm not dropping the F-bomb on live TV because, you think you know what you're doing and the next thing you know, it's like a total disaster.
Yep.
Or you didn't time it out quite well enough. You're trying to like rush it through because I will go on with one of the anchors, like they'll like for the segment and they'll just start asking questions and I'm trying to like get it all done.
And you're like, I'm busy.
Exactly. And I'm like, and so next thing you know, it's like, and it's time for a break. I'm like, well, awesome. So, this is, so one thing I want to ask too is if you were if there's one thing, and I know this is a hard question, if there's one thing you want people to know or maybe to think about when, they, are thinking about Canadian food. And I know that it can't be defined, and I feel you on that. But, maybe is there a question you want people to ask themselves? Is there something that you want people to, like, think twice when you're thinking about Canadian food, audience? Like, what do you want? What's the message from Jess?
Oh my God, I feel like I really want to double down on the fact that I strongly believe the very thing that makes food Canadian is that there's not one thing that makes it Canadian food.
Yes, I know what you mean.
But because I don't think there's one, if you ask
except for the fact that it's in Canada.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That Canadians are making it, and Canadians come from every corner of this beautiful and complicated globe. And they bring things with them. They bring traditions with them. They bring techniques with them. And then as the things that we love, it turns into something entirely new.
Yeah.
When it's here. But then also in Canada, I would say that a lot of the times in cities like Toronto in Ontario, it doesn't necessarily turn into something entirely new. It is a direct facsimile. Thank you, facsimile. Going back to the fax machine of what they brought from home, because those ingredients are available here, because there is such a demand, and there are such big populations of people coming from elsewhere, coming from away, as our Newfoundlanders say, that they are able to make things in almost the exact same way that they make them at home. So you do get like Italian Canadian food, Italian Chinese food.
Yeah.
But you can also get Chinese food and pick the region. You know what I mean?
Right.
And same with Italian food.
Yeah.
Pick the region.
I feel like with Indian as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So maybe it becomes a version of Canadian food, but it also stays close to where it came from.
Yeah. True North, strong and free.
Oh my gosh, that's good.
And that's what makes you True North, strong and free. That tapestry. That, all these people come from very different backgrounds, but when they're here, they're Canadian. It's like when you're here, you're family, right?
Yeah, it's true.
This is true. This has been so much fun. I feel like we could talk forever.
I do too.
But alas, we'll have to let you go, Jessica Allen. We are just so honored to have you on these More Than Maple episodes of Eat Your Heartland Out.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute delight.
Thank you. You've been listening to Eat Your Heartland Out. This episode was produced by me, Capri Cafaro. Our audio engineers are Liam Warner and Armin Spengen. Theme music by Jason Shaw. You can learn more about the show by visiting heritageradionetwork.org/Eat Your Heartland Out. Eat Your Heartland Out is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.